From California Reserves, gentlemen's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the distinguished gentleman and my good friend from California for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentlemen's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rule before us today provides for consideration of 4 pieces of legislation that are once again nothing but missed opportunities to address the multiple crises facing our country under the Biden presidency. So rather than working with Republicans to actually address the unmitigated crisis at our southern border, to address the Cold War we have with China and the proxy war with Russia, or the historic levels of inflation, Democrats are rushing to the floor these half-baked legislative items that will create more problems than they aim to solve. Look no further than S. 3905, the Preventing Organizational Conflicts of Interest in Federal Acquisition Act. Instead of making meaningful reforms to federal acquisition policy, this legislation is duplicative, and it's contradictory to existing policies. It also tells the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council to do something that's already required to do. Additionally, this rule provides for consideration of H.R. 1948, the VA Employee Fairness Act. This legislation would put veteran patients at risk by shifting questions of professional conduct to collective bargaining. The Secretary of the VA has been and should continue to be directly accountable for the quality of care provided to our veterans at the VA. But while we're focusing on these unnecessary bills, China has recently signed a $50 billion trade deal with our ally, Saudi Arabia. Putin once again threatened to launch a nuclear war on the West. And the wealth of the average American has dropped to the lowest level ever recorded. The chief of the U.S. Border Patrol reported that over the weekend, there were over 16,000 migrant encounters at the border. And wait for it, that was in a 48-hour period, 16,000 in less than 2 days. But President Biden hasn't stepped foot on the southern border since he took office. Last week, when he was not visiting the border while in Arizona, President Joe Biden was asked about that. In his response, and I quote, "There are more important things going on," end quote. Yet during the administration, there have been nearly 5 million illegal immigrant crossings at our southern border, and that includes 1 million gotaways. These are individuals that we have no record of, that we just know escaped into the interior of the country. Yet Biden has failed at protecting our southern border, just as he failed in America's prisoner swap with President Putin. The administration effectively surrendered to Putin by swapping a woke celebrity basketball player for the merchant of death, an international arms smuggler with the blood of Americans on his hands. This disastrous negotiation is just another failed foreign policy decision that was based on Russia's terms, not ours. This rash decision left 2 other Americans detained in Russia, Pittsburgh history teacher Mark Fogel and U.S. Marine Paul Whelan. They have no clear chance of returning home now. We have lost all leverage, unless I'm going to be surprised and discover that we have 2 merchants of death in a federal prison in the United States. Something tells me that's not the case. What we should be doing is we should be immediately acting to protect our national security. We should be ensuring the safe return of all Americans that are wrongfully detained abroad, and we should be working to secure the southern border. We should not be passing ill-conceived and unnecessary legislation. To be frank, our time is too precious and our challenges are too great. For those reasons, I urge my colleagues to oppose this rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Sirs, the